like Miami. Miami, 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 Miami. It feels like Miami.
Welcome to the EP Podcast. I'm your host, Carlo Nalva. It's an Eastern Conference Preview Edition. Finals Preview Edition. I was waiting for that. With me today, the two lovely ladies who are also great at sound effects. To my left, if you're watching on stream on twitch.tv/Miami Heatbeat, is reality check master Tiffany Meeks.
What's up?
On my right, we have the great and experienced Siobhan Beslow. Say what's up to the people, Bond, if you can hear us.
Hello, people.
You know, I'm okay,
How far are
Bond.
they?
We can hear you.
We can hear you. We lost Bond.
Let me come.
She'll be back. Full disclosure to the audience, I am passing a kidney stone. If I disappear halfway through the episode and Bond and Tiff has to carry us to the other land, you know why. I am not 100% today. I just took some medication that may or may not make me nauseous. So we will find out together as we wait for Bond to come back. Tiff?
Yes.
While we wait for Bond to come back, let's eulogize the Philadelphia 76ers. They got their ass kicked on Mother's Day. You know, all those people's mothers were watching that game.
those players had mothers.
Joel Embiid's mom had to watch him say that at the podium with or without context. Hilarious.
His wife had to watch that game with their son.
Is he married? I did not know that.
Well, his partner had to watch that game with his son.
Unfortunate.
On Mother's Day.
Happy Mother's Day, Miss Embiid. Bond, no. we were just eulogizing the Sixers while we waited for you to reconnect. Listen, we'll have much time to litigate and autopsy the process in the off season, but we would be remiss without laughing a little bit. It's part of the show. It's part of Heat Beat culture, making fun of the Sixers. And the Knicks, you know, that's just part of life. However, the Celtics are a team that I don't make too much fun of. I have a lot of respect for Boston.
Yep.
You know, maybe the outside of their arena may look like January 6th insurrection, but the team I have a ton of respect for. I think Jalen and Jason are fantastic basketball players. I think Time Lord is obviously, you know, a very, very scary, good defensive player. Horford, obviously one of the good vets of our league. Marcus Smart, I hate his fucking guts. I don't respect shit about him. But everybody else, cool in my book. We're going to talk about the offense today. We're going to preview kind of the offensive side of the ball for Miami, kind of through their lens, what they're going to have to do against the Celtics. And guys, it's all starts. Let's talk about Jimmy two ways. Let's assume that he's healthy first, and then let's talk about him if he's not healthy. I'm going to assume he'll be at 80 to 90%. If Jimmy's right, I think we've seen Tiff. He has no problem scoring against them. They have a lot of wings that they're going to throw at him.
Right.
Boston likes to double him, and they have in the past, which I think Miami kind of showed you what they're going to do if he gets doubled. They don't double like the Knicks, and we'll kind of get into the details of that. But in general, I just think Jimmy, you know, he has had his way with them. I don't think they have a wing or a player specifically that bothers him. And he's just a lot stronger than those guys, whether or not they pack the paint, even though we've seen that as well when they play Rob and Al together last year. Tiff, I just think it's a good matchup for him. He's comfortable with it. It shouldn't be a good matchup for him because they have so many wings, but he's just comfortable with them.
That can be taken a couple of ways because the reality is, we know from past experience, it's a good matchup for him. And for me, if he's semi-healthy, he's going to do what he needs to do. He's going to do Jimmy things. I think for me, is it more favorable to him, or do you think the matchups favor the Heat on offense?
That's a great question. If I think so, ask that question again, so I can really take that in.
So we know that Jimmy can take advantage of this team. We've seen him run roughshod over them. Like that's not a secret, and that's not a anything against the Celtics. It's just like you said, Jimmy is more physical. He's more methodical in his offense, and he knows what he wants to do and where he wants to go. Like we know this,
Yeah.
but we can kind of go past Jimmy as being the key. How favorable is the matchup on offense for us in general? Because we still have four other dudes out there.
I'll pass it to Bond now, but I think in general they play enough drop that I think Miami has avenues. This chat makes fun of my collar. Listen, man, I just came from the hospital. Cut me some goddamn slack sheet that says my collar looks like it just escaped a sex trafficker. Why do you think I'm purposefully like doing this the whole show?
What is wrong with y'all?
I know they're crazy.
Insane.
Yeah, Bond, I like that question by Tiff. I mean, I think that Boston plays enough drop that it kind of gives Miami shooters and their pick and roll guys a little bit of kind of downhill viability, or at least maybe not so much downhill viability, but at like angles to shoot the ball coming off screens or a little space to eat coming off pick and roll. I know Lowry likes it. Obviously Duncan, Max, those kinds of guys. Whereas like kind of switch defenses, which Boston can't switch. I mean, they can go a little bit smaller and they could switch at least 1 through 4 for sure that they're comfortable switching. So I think in general, and we see Miami without Jimmy score a ton of points at Boston in their building. So I don't think it's as bad as it seems on paper. I think it kind of depends on how much Boston switches versus drops.
I agree. And I like the way that Tiffany posed the question, right? Jim is going to do what Jim is going to do, but are there other places within the 4 and then within what we bring off the bench to, kind of get in and create the unified momentum of offense that then kind of becomes overwhelming, especially at home, especially when shooters start to click and things. And I think G is spot on. And it being maybe the difference in between how much drop and switch or just how physical Boston can commit to being defensively. Like they have athletes and they do play with force. And at times last series, I was watching game 1 of last series, like they outforced us sometimes. They may have been sloppier, but they outforced us in athleticism as well, or coupled with the athleticism and just length and stuff like that. So if they can commit to, really maximizing their kind of gifts, I would say collectively, Brogdon, Jason, Jalen, D-Rob is, a great athlete. Marcus Smart is, intelligent. I still do think that the matchup kind of favors us, right? Like I tweeted about it maybe yesterday or a couple of days ago. I genuinely expect, like G said, the shooters that he mentioned, I expect guys like a Gabe too, right? Seeing kind of a similar coverage that that kind of Milwaukee showed him and how he was able to kind of more confidently, especially in comparison to last year, kind of pick his spots. I think you see some resurgence in that for him too. And so I think so, man. I think it's going to come, last thing here, I think a lot of it's going to come down to how creative Spo is willing to be, how deep he's willing to trust in his bench, how much he's willing to kind of open the book up. Can you use Jimmy as a roller sometimes and get into that little pocket that they, kind of like to leave open a bit. So I think that we have the things to do it. It's just how much of the hand are we going to show and how soon and when and stuff like that.
Bon, I love that you said that because I thought last series, one of the big kind of adjustments Spo made mid-series was Jimmy becoming more of a screener. They did double a lot. They did kind of send a lot of help. And the way that they mitigated that was kind of putting him in pick and roll with either Tyler, with a lot with Kyle, really, especially in that game 6 where they both had a really good game. And you just kind of get them going downhill without letting them kind of switch and manipulate matchups because at that point, Boston has to make a decision. And when he slips a screen, that help has to come really, really fast. And he's such a good passer out of the short roll. Now, Miami shot 30%.
That's it, the passing out the short roll.
Which Bam is good at it too.
Bam.
But Bam doesn't roll as quickly.
Know who else we miss? I put in a chat. We miss Markeith a little bit here. You miss PJ. If you can, if because you're gonna want to have him on the floor defensively, and Hamish. If you can find ways to kind of like use him in the like the side ball screen type of swing, open up in just that little triangle pocket, little push shot area. I think that they have kind of ways to do it. Like you say, it might not be so much like downhill, but being able to kind of probe a bit to then maneuver out of it.
Like, Tiff, I think if you're in Miami, the thing you worry about is kind of what happened last year where they start Robert Williams and Al Horford. And I think that's a big question kind of going into game one. Is Boston going to stick to their normal starting lineup that they've gone to all season, or are they going to start the two bigs? And if you're the Heat, you know, I think you worry most if they start both bigs because now, you know, you can kind of help off whoever that corner person is. Now, in the starting lineup, that gets a little tricky because it'll, you know, you have Miami. Miami has Love, Bam, you know, Jimmy, Max, and Gabe. Less guys to help off of, and you know maybe Boston is living with Kevin Love taking a bunch 7, 8 threes a game. If that's the case, you know, I don't know how you feel about that. If you're the Heat, I probably don't feel great.
Right.
But if Kevin hits shots, then, you know, that Boston has to adjust. But,
Right.
you know, that's kind of what I worry because what they were doing last year was, especially off Bam pick and rolls, they were kind of dropping. You had Horford on Bam. So Horford's kind of sinking low almost by the free throw line. Not quite a Brook Lopez drop tiff, but like, you know, pretty deep, you know, not fearing Miami's pull-up game considering how bad they shot. And Rob is kind of coming off the help. So if Bam does slip, Rob meets him. Or if Bam rolls, Rob kind of comes to his strong arm, and Bam really has nowhere to spin or go, and the play just kind of dies. And that happened repeatedly because they just ignored Tucker, and the short roll pass is to Tucker, who's not either hitting shots or is not taking them. So if I'm Miami, I'm afraid of a repeat happening. Obviously, Missoula's not Ime Udoka. They're different coaches that value different things, but that's the one thing on offense, if I'm Miami, that I'm a little bit afraid of, Tiff.
Right. I mean, and that's exactly what you just said. So if Kevin Love is hitting shots, then you're okay.
Kevin and Max, I think, because
Max,
yeah,
right. Well, first of all, I don't think they're going to leave Max wide open anywhere. Like I think there's going to be somebody glued to him. Like you literally can't afford to let him see the first shot go in. Like that's just, you know, that's just
especially
what it is
in a game
when it comes
one.
to him. So I don't think he's going to be as open or they're going to help off of him. No, I think it's going to be those first couple of minutes. I think that's going to be Kevin Love time. Like if they start Kevin Love, he's going to get those shots. And he's got to see a couple go in. Like we can't have him shoot like he shot the last 2 games of the last series. Like not against the Celtics. Like you can't, it's not sustainable. If he's on the court, I get it. He gives you other things, but if he's on the court, he's got to make shots.
Bon, I think you're muted.
I feel like it's weird too because he's getting good looks, but it feels like the angle, I don't know. It feels like the angle that he's catching it at is almost like just 15 degrees off from where he really feels comfortable kind of in his gather into it. Like I feel like, I don't know, maybe younger Kevin Love or lighter, what maybe just springier. Like if he would just, I don't know, it's just some lift, but the shots are there. And I expect him to take it. We've seen him make it, you know, at points throughout the postseason. And I think you're encouraged by the sustainability with which it feels like they're able to get good stuff out of he and Jimmy. The he and Jimmy pick and roll has been, pick and pop has done a lot for them. So I don't expect it to not.
Something you could do, guys, is, and it's a little bit maybe unconventional, is you kind of run the empty corner Jimmy Love pick and roll, and you have Bam in the dunker spot, and you know you wait for Horford to step up on that, and you kind of have that easy, you know, drop pass to Bam, who's in the paint already, and then you know obviously whoever that shooter is on the weak side is going to have to sink in to help if Horford steps up. Right, so then Jimmy has kind of another guy, and he's kind of facing that. So I think that is going to give them multiple options, and that's kind of, I mean, they ran that a lot against New York, you know, especially against like Mitchell Robinson and guys like that. And it just makes sense if you're Miami to like, okay, well, how can we get Bam and Jimmy in the right places and involve Love enough that he's not just a jump shooter.
Right. Right. It's also interesting because like where I would have thought maybe a month ago we were at a deficit when it came to the offense, just over this run, there are combinations now that Spokane put out there that seem very comfortable together. That didn't look so great together in the regular season, but now all of a sudden things are kind of clicking. So I feel like I don't feel as worried when it's like, all right, who's coming in? When you do the Love Caleb swap, or either you do Gabe Kyle swap, or you have a backcourt of Gabe and Kyle. Like I'm not. Like I'm not as worried as maybe I should be worried, but I'm not as worried now when I'm thinking about the combinations of people that Spo's been able to pull off the bench and been able to get a good 3 minutes here, a good 2 minutes here. I don't know. How do you guys feel about it?
I think like Highsmith is a guy that I look at on offense this series. It's like was critical to the regular season matchups. I thought he did a great job on Jason Tatum.
Yep.
On defense, we're gonna get more of that tomorrow on the defense show, but on offense, and I think you saw in that Knicks series, he's a guy that they're gonna be very comfortable leaving open.
Right.
He's not the most confident shooter, and he's willing, but not the most confident. Great cutter, by the way. Very active cutter, moves really well. But just kind of bogs down your offense a little bit because he's just a little too green. He's a guy that I look at in kind of what you're talking about, Tiff, and it's like, well, can they buy – can he play for 5 minutes, 5 to 7 minutes? Is that too much? Maybe that's an early series thing. By Spawn, I see you nodding. Not a late series thing. And sometimes these games kind of swing, in those little like, hey, can we buy 3 minutes of Jimmy rest? Or can we buy 3 minutes of Bam rest by just going like this gunky defensive lineup, right? And let's just hold the fort kind of thing. If we hit – and really, Bond, in those kinds of units, if you just hit 1-3, sometimes that's enough to sustain you for those 3 to 4 minutes.
Yes. And that's we make like playable chunks of time sound so engorged, and they're weighty. Like it's a game of inches. Things, details, and things matter, of course, right? But like with someone like a Hamish, you're in a really good spot because he has the prototypical kind of length, and he can do enough on both sides of the ball that you're not even getting away minutes with him. I feel, depending on how you use him, with him on the floor. I do.
I honestly think he does.
I think he for sure does. G, you were talking about the like trying some Kevin, Jimmy, empty corner, just them two, Bam as your dunker spot. And you're mostly going to get like the Kevin pop out of that. I think that there's space to kind of, if you don't trust the shot consistently enough, I think there's space to drill making or allowing Hamish to kind of be the decision maker out of like setting that same screen, but kind of opening up very much in a way that a PJ would. He's lanky enough. I don't know if I want to see consistent or like steady doses of it, but
Highsmith, I think screen for Jimmy and pick and roll.
Yeah, and like let him kind of settle into kind of that pocket, the nailish area. You still have Bam in the dunker spot. And what we don't do as consistently as we used to, shout out PJ for sure. And Caleb does it sporadically. We don't set enough flares. We don't set enough hammers. We don't set like enough pinchings. So while whatever's happening over here in this pick and roll corner, and then Bam occupying the short corner, we don't like, and defenses are turned, like they're occupied, and we'll just exchange or kind of brush by, where PJ would seek out Duncan, come off of this, Max fade off of this. Caleb does it sporadically, but I think if there's space enough to plug some of the pieces, and be surprised, I think, with what you may get out of them.
Right.
I don't know. I want to push back on that, Bond, because I don't like – so I think with the defense like Boston's, where they have a lot of wings, I don't think you want to invite another guy, because like that's an easy switch if you're Boston, right? If you're having Highsmith and maybe that's favorable for Miami, and that's an easy switch or a trap. And I think if you're Miami, and if Boston can get the ball out of Jimmy's hands, and you run your offense through Highsmith at the nail, that's a huge win for them. And I think you want to mitigate that as much. So it's different when so like when the Knicks were doubling, it's like Duncan comes screen and it's a small guy in the double, right? Or Gabe comes to screen, or Kyle comes to screen. It's like you're not inviting a wing to double, and you're not inviting a wing to switch. You bring a smaller guy, and those guys have ball skill. So when you flash to the middle of the floor, like you saw at the end of that game, like Gabe flashes to the middle of the floor, is able to make a play and get Bam a dunk. I think that's kind of more of the stuff you're looking at, not like, oh, I don't want to invite Boston to let Highsmith make decisions. I think you want his role to be as like streamlined, like, hey, hit this open corner shot, like cut to the basket and like get yourself a layup.
Cut.
I think when you start like, hey, like you're going to be screening with Jimmy, I think that simplifies it too much for Boston. I think you want to make them make tougher decisions.
Go ahead, Tiff. I'm not. You're.
Go
I
ahead,
like. I'm not mad at what you said.
No,
Go ahead, Tiff.
I just just like, gee, you don't think he's getting minutes, or what do you?
I think they'll play him a little bit in game 1, and Spo will feel it out. And I think if by game 2, it's not like like I'm very comfortable in these minutes with him on the floor, like on offense, I think he may not be able to play a lot. Now, they don't have. It's funny because they were able to contain Milwaukee and really New York. New York didn't have a great offensive series against them. And their defense has been good and bad. It's kind of been both. It's been very weird this postseason. But I think that Jimmy's minutes are going to get too high, and Bam's minutes are going to get too high, where I just don't know if there's going to be a place for him as the series progresses. Like I said, maybe early. Although these game 1, like they need to get one of these 2 games.
Yeah,
I think that's critical. So I don't know, and you know Spo. Like you know the guys that Spo wants to play. Like incoming Caleb 38 minutes. You know what I mean? Kind of game.
Right. Yeah, well, I also think that, like, because how many did he run last series? Did 9, 10 guys? 10
I think
guys,
it
was
was
it?
8 because Highsmith was
I
the
think he
9th.
ran 10 guys.
Was it 10? Well, yeah, because Zeller. Well, that's the other guy
He
that
played Zeller.
we gotta get
It
into
had to be.
if they're gonna play Zeller. So I'll count right now. So in Game 6 against the
Right.
Knicks, they played Butler, Love, Bam, Strus, Vincent. That's 5. Lowry 6, Martin 7, Zeller 8, Duncan 9. So they ran 9.
Right.
Without Highsmith would be the 10th guy.
Right.
I think all those guys minus Zeller is guaranteed minutes at this point. Cody has been a little bit weird. I think they'll play him game 1 and they'll see. He's a guy that's also going to be like, well, can we buy some minutes with him at the 5? If not, we'll just play Love for 3 and Bam, you got to play 40.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the interesting part is because the only reason why I think Highsmith plays more than we think is just for the defense alone. Because you don't have Vic, so that's a true defender. And if you're looking at everyone you just named coming off the bench, that's really just Kyle and Caleb.
Right. You're gonna have to rely on more people than that.
And Duncan.
And I'm gonna say it again. That's
okay,
really just
and he
Kyle
says it's shaky
and Caleb.
too. Exactly, right.
Right.
You don't know that you're more so going to rely on Duncan than you are Hamish.
Right.
We saw him not go to Duncan a lot before.
I think Duncan's kind of secure in the rotation just because they just need one more shooter because if Tyler was healthy, he just doesn't play. Right?
No, right.
And I'll give him credit. Like he's been attacked on defense. I think he's back to his 2020 defense. His defense got a lot worse the last 2 years. I don't think he's playing at that bad a level right now. I think he's about where he was in 2020, where it's like he might make a play here and there, but in reality, he's just going to get targeted, which is why he can't close.
I think so. Okay, so a little to the point about kind of where Tiffany's coming from, and a little bit about my feelings about Hamish is like, I'm not saying you rely on consistent doses of him having to make decisions out of, because I think that gets into, I agree with you with that being, schemable, maybe a little bit to Boston's advantage. I think I was mostly speaking to, like, you talk about, can you get away with 3 minutes? Can you get away with kind of 5 and 6? And maybe you hit a corner three in one of those, and that is the play. You play defense, which, Tiff, to your point, I think you see a lot of Haywood, because I don't think that Miami. I think that you have to score, but you have to be committed to defending this series. I don't think that you want to try to get into or assume that you can match with ease because of just like the volume that they shoot, because of kind of the I don't know. I put value in the isolation players that they have. I think with that though, we have to. I think I would like to see us more be concerned about how we look defensively, but I understand that you have to score, and I think you can do that and still feel good about your prospects.
It's for sure a balance that they have to manage, and I think it's funny how we spent so much time talking about the 10th guy off the bench, because it's just that kind of, the Heat are just that kind of team that they have to find random contributions here and there. Let's shift over to Bam a little bit, because I think if they're gonna win this series, Jimmy has to be healthy. We'll talk about hobbled Jimmy later. You're going to need Jimmy to look good, to kind of operate in pick and roll as he does, to get to the mid-range as he's been so good at. I think Boston has fewer matchups that he can exploit as a post-up player, but I'm sure that he'll look for White. He'll look for Brogdon. He'll look for those kinds of guys. It's like, okay, can I put these guys in the torture chamber, either off the dribble or in the post? He wasn't great in the post against New York. Part of that, I imagine, was the ankle, but kind of know what we're getting from Jimmy, and how Boston kind of talked a little bit how Boston's going to scheme him. He'll see some switches. He'll see some blitzing. He'll see a little bit of everything as we're going around some with the Celtics. And I think New York was kind of good preparation to show how they would adjust to that. New York didn't switch too much, but other than that, switch wings or bigs onto him. But I think we kind of see how that worked the other way. With Bam, guys, I think you're going to need to see a lot of what we saw in Game 6 out of Bam, a lot of kind of post isolations in the mid post, face up, go to the basket. Not so much as a roller because of how they just defend him by sending a big from the weak side over to. You just want to isolate that action, like get him some good post touches near the basket, have him face up against a guy like Al Horford, who's very good, and see if he can kind of beat him off the dribble. If not, I think the Heat have done this a lot this season too, is kind of stretch out your pick and roll, right? Like straight your screen up higher, give him a slip into more space. And I think Lowry is pretty critical to that as well, because if he's going to be able to hit that pull up or actually do damage in pick and roll, I think that Horford has to play a little bit higher at the level. It gives Bam a little bit more room. And if Caleb's in that corner, for example, I'm okay with that short roll pass to Caleb Martin in the corner for three. Also because Caleb can close the gap. If he attack the closeout, he's very willing to drive. And I think that's kind of the recipe for Miami outside of Butler, is like, okay, can we make this Kyle or Gabe Bam pick and roll deadly enough from the ball handler and from the weak side shooter that Bam can do Bam things? Tiff.
I mean, we hope. That's what we want. And it's so funny you mentioned Caleb, and in my mind I like see Caleb, and I'm like, I just want to see him doing one or two things, either catch it and shoot it, or just drive to the basket.
But that's what he does.
That's it.
He's
But
an
no,
instruction
I don't want to see
follower.
but I don't want to see the other stuff.
You don't want to see the dribble between the legs?
Nope. I don't want.
It's Caleb Martin time, baby.
It's Caleb time, baby. I don't want to see it.
Caleb's on TV.
Listen, I trust Caleb shooting that three in the corner, and I trust him getting to the rim.
Tiff, how you feel about that hitch? How you feel about that hitch?
I was about to say hitching all.
At
this point, I have embraced the hitch.
You know how some players lean in off a miss? When Caleb leans in, I was like, oh, that shit's going in. Because everything about his shot is backwards.
It's funny because I always say to Bond, I'm like, listen, I love it when Caleb is shooting the three or when he's getting to the basket. But when he at the top of the key with the ball, I can't. I get nauseous.
To that though, they started doing some stuff last series. They had schemes designed for him to have a couple dribbles off of like some stags and do a little bit something. Like they looked like they had intention with Caleb at the top of the key that time. But no, you are absolutely right. When it
No.
was just him, just like pointing out, yeah, come set this.
Right.
He
Right.
about
I
to
don't.
no. Mm-mm.
It's
Man was
like
making
you
his
just
own and one mixtape.
He was about
man.
to boogie. And I
It's
can't even be better.
Caleb
But
time.
when you're athletic, you want to be able to just
Yeah.
spring out. You want to be able to
Well, the
kind of
other
just
thing
go.
is like Jimmy and Bam are off the floor, and Caleb's like, "My time to shine, baby."
I
Who
know.
else?
Who else is it?
He's been so good off the bench. I'm just glad he's back.
No,
And
I
is like,
love Caleb.
yeah. Did you read? Did
I love
anybody
Caleb.
read that article today from the Athletic about Eric Spoelstra?
No,
No,
I
I didn't even
didn't.
see
It was
it.
I
really
saw some
great.
quotes.
It was kind of talking about. It was really a story about how Spo won't tell his own story because he doesn't do interviews. So other people were telling Spo's story for him. A lot of principals, Josh Richardson, Olynyk, Kevin Love, Caleb Martin was one of them. Spoke a lot in the piece, and it was just talking about Eric as a coach. Josh Richardson would talk about how he would do shooting drills. He'd be like, he's in the gym on his off day,
Yep.
and Spo scrolls in, and he's like, "What you doing?" Doing shooting drills. He's like, "Well, shoot 100 and make 70," and like Josh hits like 50, and Spo's like, "Well, what are you doing? Start running wind sprints." He's like, "This is my off day."
Yep.
Spo's like, "You want to work, don't you?" And Spo's like running. The guy comes back and he shoots like 5 more, and Spo's like, "Get your ass and start running." And Josh is getting mad, and he's like, and then Spo's like, "This is what I mean. You got to compete with yourself." And eventually, Josh hits like 80 of 100. Spo comes up to him, he like fucking slaps him 3 times in the chest. He's like, "That's what it means. It's a fight with yourself." It is the most chuny cool shit ever. I was like, man, Spo's so real for that. And just kind of talk about his environment. But Caleb talked about Spo when they traded for Love, which I read this and I thought it was so funny because you remember we're like, are they starting Kevin Love? Are they not? And Spo's like, I haven't made a decision on this. Apparently the decision was made like a day after Kevin Love got signed. He sends Caleb.
Of course it was.
We've
course
all
it
sent
was.
that text that Spo had to send. Apparently,
Yes.
Caleb was like, he sent like a whole screen full of text. And Spo's like, "Hey, listen, man, it's for the team." And he's like explaining shit. And I just thought it was funny.
Of
And Caleb's
course
like,
it was.
Caleb's like, I just appreciated that he just didn't like tell me in the office. Like he understood that like I was competing and then I was helping the team, but that this was a sacrifice for the greater good, that it had nothing to do with my play. It was about doing, and I don't know. It's just Spo's awesome. I don't know why I brought that up, but fucking Spo's great. I love Spo.
No, and it says a lot about Caleb. Like Caleb,
Yeah.
Caleb is and you can see it on the court. Caleb is a team first guy.
And he's a proud player.
Like, yes,
Mhm.
yes. Like
And
I
once
joke, and I'm always
coached, wants to be coached hard, wants to be pushed.
exactly. I joke, and I'm always like, "Oh, it's Caleb time." But like, I can really say when it comes to players in the NBA, I don't. Caleb's not out there being selfish. He is a team guy. He's doing everything he can to help this team win. Um, it's interesting because like, how do you? Because Caleb is a part of that bench unit. So what do you? How do you see if it stays the same with the same starters, and the first game it's the same rotation? Like, how do you see this matchup happening with the bench unit once Caleb comes in, and then you'll have Kyle come in shortly after? Like, how do you see that? Is there a lot? You think there's going to be a lot of opportunities for Caleb?
So I look at the Caleb and Lowry numbers together as kind of a bench kind of litmus test. You know, together they're +3 on the in the play. Oh, I'm sorry, that was the regular season. I was like, that's kind of low. I thought in the playoffs they were plus
Right.
a bunch. Yeah, in the playoffs they're +11 in almost 220 minutes, 229 minutes. The minutes are racking up for these units. Like
Yeah.
some of the stuff is becoming pretty real. You know, Caleb without Lowry is +17. Jesus Christ.
Jesus.
Yeah. And by the way, without Caleb and Lowry on the floor, the Heat are only a +1. So, I mean, they are playing fantastic with those guys off the bench. Those are their 2 most important bench players. To kind of give you another idea, Lowry plus Caleb, no Jimmy, in almost 100 minutes. They're +7 net rating. So, they're just winning without Jimmy. They're winning without Bam on the floor. These bench guys are killing it. And part of that is Lowry's been a really good pick and roll player. in the playoffs. Bond, I know we've talked about kind of his old man griff when he gets by the first guy and then puts the other defender on his hip. He does that 1-2
And then
dribble.
the
Yeah. He sticks his ass
sticks it
out.
out.
You know, he's waiting.
Oh,
He's waiting
oh,
to
Jesus,
see.
mom's
It
like,
is. Ah.
It's so funny because really what he's doing, he's like, is this big guy going to jump so I can feed my dunker spot guy a dunk? No, I'm grifting, pulling up for a jump shot and forcing contact. And it's so funny. But he's been really good at it. And Caleb and him have played very well together. Defensively, they've been very solid, forcing – I believe the two of them forced a ton of turnovers. By the way, so no Bam and no Jimmy, Caleb and Kyle on the floor, plus 21 in 30 minutes for the playoffs net rating. So
that's awesome.
Tiff, I cannot say enough about how good those guys have been. And against Boston, I actually think this is a huge Kyle series. I think if there was a time, it's now. We've seen him play well against them in the regular season. We saw how he looked in Game 6, even though he was hobbled. I actually think that this is a series where he could do real damage.
It's funny, Bond. We just said that. We just said this is a Bam and Kyle. Like this is where they really have to step up. We just had this conversation.
Yeah, and G, you're right. It's what Kyle's game is, what his abilities are, given the drop that Boston plays. Again, I've maintained it's why you miss Tyler. I'm rewatching Game 1 of last year's Eastern. Tyler had from like 7:47 around the time he entered in like the second quarter. Everything good that happened was him. We went on like a 6-0 run because of what his game is, how he can get into those pockets at the nail and like at the third hash mark, and just the really, really tough, really precise places that you have to get because of how slippery he is and how good his handle is. And so Kyle can get to those same pockets, but his just looks different. His just looks choppy. Vic had ability to get into those same pockets, but he was always at risk of overshooting it because, he's a dart, right? Jimmy can get into those pockets. He's sturdy enough. And I think you saw Gabe seek out those pockets, like I said, in the Milwaukee series. So I think it's a big Kyle series. I think you get some like Kevin Love, Kyle middle pick and roll, and you let Kevin pop, and then you just stretch that pocket open even a bit more. So I'm actually really excited. I think this is one that they're up for, and I just want to. I'm actually like very, very excited for this matchup. I wanted Philly, or wouldn't have cared if it was Philly, but like I'm excited for this, and I know
excited.
that they are too.
Tiff, the other aspect of Kyle is that he's provided like legitimate downhill pressure. He's actually gotten into the paint. He's forcing help. And that's been the big element that's been missing from their offense pretty much for 2 years now. 4 years, really, the entire Jimmy era. And especially without Tyler, you feel it because really he was the only guy that was creating off the dribble. Now you have a guy who's, I think he had 9 assists through 3 quarters or something in Game 6 against the Knicks or something crazy like that. Not turning the ball over, really helping you on defense, but on offense, just getting by guys. And I think against Boston, that's going to be huge because he's going to see a lot of Horford and drop, and he's going to see a lot of Rob Williams and drop. And if he's been a very willing pull-up shooter, and I like that because I think that if they're going to win this series, they need to do what they couldn't do last year, which is attack that drop, which is something that they shredded all year last year, and their legs, and that goes for Max as well. Like any of these guys, Max is a pick-and-roll handler. I think we'll see a little bit more of this series because the Celtics, the Knicks pressed a little bit higher than the Bucks, and I think the Celtics are more of a middle ground. Horford, they have to force Horford to go up to the level, I think, and I think that Boston's going to make them prove it. So I think this is a big series for anybody who can pull up and shoot, which sucks that Tyler's not playing.
Right.
You miss it so much. Some of these clips are so pretty. Like when he's on, like it's fun.
It's fun.
Right. No, it is. I just think that you know who you don't have. You know who's not walking through that door. So listen, would you say they played 9 guys? All right. So those 9 guys will get minutes probably, right? You know you're going to get something. So you're not fighting for minutes.
You
You'll
think
get
Cody's
in there.
playing a lot?
Well, he's definitely going to play, I think, Wednesday.
Yeah.
And then we'll see. The problem with him was he had the way
He is a
the
little all
series
over the place by
ended,
the end.
yeah, the way the series ended for him with against the Knicks was not good.
It started great. Game 4,
It
he was
started great,
fantastic. Game 4.
yeah, but the last two games he was off, and I mean in every aspect.
He's
Like
not
he
viable on
wasn't
the other side of the
he
floor
wasn't
either.
boxing out. Like
Yeah.
he just looked off, and I don't know. I mean, obviously, bad matchups are bad matchups, but it wasn't like I didn't even feel like he was even in the overall right position. Like it just seemed like he was always a step slow in those last two games.
Something that we haven't talked about yet, Bon, I think they need to look to attack Jaylen Brown in one-on-one situations, and get him in pick and roll, get him moving, because
Hmm.
for as good as a defender as he is, he does get a little lost. And if you go, I should correct, not to go at him one-on-one, but to make him defend screens. Put him in actions, make him make decisions on defense, because if there's a place where he struggles, it's that. And that you want him to kind of be your ball hand. Like if you're Miami on defense, you want him to handle the ball, because we all know the turnover and dribble stuff, blah blah blah. It's been talked about a lot. But on defense, I do think that's a weak spot. I think for as good as a defender as Derek White is, he is going to be a target for Jimmy. For as good of a defender as Brogdon is, that's going to be a target. We've already talked about the bigs. I actually think Jason Tatum is a guy that is probably the least likely to go at, even though they should at times, because you want to force him to kind of foul and stuff. But I think Jalen's another guy that I know these are good defenders, but make these guys make plays and make them prove to you. Don't let them live off reputation, because, I thought last series they got a lot of success of kind of getting a back cut off Jalen who wasn't paying attention, or getting a back cut because Jalen's paying attention to something else. So I think stuff like that I think is important for Miami's offense.
Who do you see Jalen Garden?
So I kind of think they go.
Follow up things. Go ahead.
I probably imagine they're going to go Tatum on Jimmy to start, and they'll probably put Jalen on Max, Jalen on Max, to start. So Boston actually has a couple things they can do. When rubber hits the road, they could put Marcus Smart on Bam, and then start switching a bunch of stuff if they want to go smaller. So you can go like Horford on Love and Marcus Smart on Bam, and then you switch anything pretty much, and I think you're pretty comfortable with it. I don't think they'll do that off the rip. I think they're going to play it straight up if they do start both bigs. If they don't, so Grant Williams is another guy that I think, and I know this isn't like totally answering your question, Bam has to beat the Grant Williams allegations, because
I agree.
that's a low key kind of thing that Grant Williams like low key like gives Bam.
It's underspoken. We don't talk about it.
The streets
talk
know.
about it, but
Tiff,
it's there.
the streets know.
It's there.
Yeah.
They don't like each
there.
other. They do not like each other, and they both take that very personally. And Bam has not gotten the better of him when he defends one-on-one. And I think about me when you watch that. So that's another thing that we got to watch for, and Bam has to win.
I think you put Jaylen Brown and Al Horford in pick and roll. And then I also think that, like you said, that you find ways to go at to kind of go at Grant Williams. I agree, Bam, not needing to do too much, but needing to hold his own. And I think in just doing that, right. I think just in doing that, he'd come out the prevailer. But I do think you put whoever Jalen is guarding, just try it for me one time. Whoever Jalen's guarding, whoever Al Horford's guarding, send Al's man pick and roll. I hope it's Kevin. I hope it's a pick and pop. And I'm even cool with that's like a Caleb. And you just see if you can turn the corner a little bit, see if you can get some cinching in off the corner. And I know Zeller has been like a little bit all over the place, but he and Kyle, he and Jimmy found a little bit of comfort in the short roll and in the two-man kind of in there. And again, if you can have the more competent and composed humans you can put in kind of like the short roll decision-making area, it's kind of to your advantage. So I don't know if you see him a ton, but there's space for the skills always.
Let me ask you something about your boy, because we have not talked about Gabe Vincent. I think that Jalen guarding Gabe Vincent makes a lot of sense as well. You put Marcus in a matchup where he can switch more. Marcus is probably going to see a lot of time on Jimmy as well. I could totally see them putting Jalen on Gabe Vincent. And at that point, I think it's on Gabe, as we saw in that Knicks series. He's gonna have a drop lane, and they're gonna have to make Jalen navigate screens. And I think if Gabe can hit some of those pull-ups from 3 or from mid-range at the nail, that's huge for them in this series, because you can't let them hide guys. Miami's fortunate that all these guys can make plays. It's just like the consistency of their ability to make those plays.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. If he can get to the nail, if he can get to like that third hash, and it might not be like at the angle directly off of the corner, it might be like a bit pushed out to the side, but that little kind of oblong space is there for him to
Right.
get to.
I think too, like we have to like just be honest. Like that game 7, Philly Boston, like Philly didn't make them play defense.
Boston didn't play
Like
an NBA team that day.
no. Well,
No, they
and,
definitely didn't.
but even throughout that series, there were just large pockets of them not having to play any defense. Like Philly just didn't do anything, or they just come down and just jack up a shot, and that's it. It's like you got to make them move. You got to keep them. You got to make them be honest in their defense, and not just can sit back and get the rebound and just push it forward.
So
So we just go ahead, G.
no, keep going.
No, I was just gonna say, like we just got to stick with our principles and make sure we are running our offense.
Boston's defense has been a little weird because like Harden kind of snuck up on them a couple times. Trae Young got the best of them a couple times too many. I could see Jimmy having kind of that kind of series against them, and I think we just talked about kind of the Jaylen Brown element. We know none of those guys can really guard Jimmy one-on-one, but Boston's strength is even like their guys like Derek White is a great defender. That's huge for Miami to kind of put those guys in actions. I think kind of emptying aside for Jimmy, if he's right, is going to be their best form of offense. It gets everybody out of the way. Get this guy one-on-one with either Derek White or Brogdon. And hell, Bond, he went out Smart last year a ton. They put Smart as a guy in pick and roll, and Jimmy went right at him. And it's like grift versus grift. Who like the ref's blowing a whistle one way or the other. And I
Flip
like
a
that
coin.
Jimmy forced that issue. Like fucking Marcus is falling over, his ass down, legs up type shit. And Jimmy is bulldozing. Something's getting called. But I like him going at those guys, like, and I think it's kind of critical to their offense.
I agree. And he's steady enough too as someone else who can operate in that just like the middle kind of belly of Boston's defense is where it's loose. But I agree. I like him, going at the Marcus, because Marcus, for as stocky as he is, right? Like Jimmy is an athlete, and if he's good, if he can elevate enough, and like his release is different than what it was like last season. It's a bit more raised, and it like I think helps in his elevation, like the momentum kind of in his jump shot. Like it just feels more smooth this season. The release just it feels softer, and so even off of the turnaround, off of that like the little shimmy, and then the over the left on the baseline, like all of his actions just feel more honed. And so to go at Marcus, I want to see it. I think Brogdon might have something for him physically, but Jimmy's a master. Like the pivot he's been doing in the post. Exactly.
Yeah.
The pivot, like the master class he's been putting on in the post. So I do want to see kind of like the I think our mains have to accept the responsibility of doing main things and kind of pressing the issue a little bit, but where everyone else's have to feel comfortable and find some confidence and getting to the things that they know that they can get to, that they've seen themselves get to. I believe that they'd find that they have a lot of it there. And play Duncan.
Yeah. So Boston actually gives up the second most amount of mid-range jump shots in the league.
It's right there.
Do you know who gives up the most, Bond and Tiff? Do you want to guess? Milwaukee. And I think
that's that fucking drop. That's why I don't know how they have these defensive candidates. The principles don't make sense.
Well, we were talking about earlier about like their drop is like, I think that Miami has guys that are really good at eating space in that drop, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
Jimmy, Kyle, like these guys are able to kind of chew on that and get to their spots. And if Jimmy's ankle's right, and he needs to get the lift, because I think what's underrated about his jump shot is how much lift he gets. Because I mean, he's before, remember, Tiff, it used to be the wrist.
Mm-hmm.
Now the wrist is good, knock on wood, but the lift without the ankle is a problem, especially on those kind of turnaround post-ups. So you kind of get Milwaukee in a drop, you eat space, and that's what we talked about earlier about those kind of empty corner, love Jimmy pick and roll. You put, that doesn't matter when Rob Williams comes from the weak side to help, because if you're trying to get to your spot on the baseline, which I believe from the left baseline, Jimmy led the league in points there. You just get to your spot and elevate, and it doesn't matter who's coming to help, because now that guy is not an offensive rebounding, that's not in rebounding position. Your weak side guy, if it's Caleb Martin, can come in and crash, or your guy on the wing can kind of pinch in if it's a long rebound, as we've seen Gabe do and Kyle do a ton last series. That's the kind of stuff that gets kind of your offense going, and that's kind of how Jimmy killed them last year, kind of getting to those spots, and also as a roller and just straight up bullying guys to the rim. So there's a world where they can score enough points. I'm not, which is funny because I've never thought I would say this. And shout out to Lefty Leif in chat, says I think we get a good series from Max, Gabe, K-Love, K-Lo, and varying times and levels.
Yeah.
I can't believe he's saying need Gabe to bring those alpha scorer guts. I'm not worried about Gabe with that, Bon. We know Gabe at MSG, when the lights were bright, according to Jared Allen, who Jackson Frank said might be better than Bam a couple of years ago. Poor thing. Gabe Vincent said the lights are not too bright.
Listen, the pocket is right there. He's getting into it with a jump shot now, whereas last season he was trying to come off it softly with that. Like the little guys, Kyle, they're too small to like get some to try to float that, right? Because by the time it gets up, I'm rising with it. Like you have to put way too much on it for that to, feel sustainable. But coming off, quick bounce, I call it the mellow package, right? Like sometimes that pocket, sometimes the pocket is just, it feels like it's a full step away when really it's like a half step. But like that quick dribble is really hard to kind of do. And so like to be able to kind of get in there and be settled, you really, really miss Tyler. And so I expect I expect all of them to come out with a little bit of like liberalness and kind of seeking out, some productivity in that area.
Tiff, is there any defensive matchup on the Celtics side that we haven't gone to that you kind of like as an area of exploitation for Miami? I think we've covered most of them, but I don't know if you had one that you wanted to highlight, or maybe one that Miami might have to watch out for.
I'm gonna say something real crazy because
I love crazy,
and this is because I was watching that series. I in my mind, I think the matchup you go at is Jason Tatum.
That's interesting.
I think and I say this because
he'll guard Jimmy
score, but he's got to score on the other end. You have to make him work, and you can't let him sit back and do nothing like Philly did, and then come down the court and walk into threes.
They put him on Tobias Harris, is why.
You got to put.
That's it. You have to engage him. You can't let him sit and play free safety. He's a good enough digger. Off ball defense, he's gotten a lot better at. You got to actively go at him.
You have to. You got to put him in. Listen, I don't care if you put him in 100 actions. You got to get him moving. You got to get him wondering and thinking. Because if you just let him sit back and nothing's happening, he's going to go down. He's going to give you 40. He's giving you 40 with ease because he's doing nothing on the other end. Like, I'm telling you, when I watched this last game, he wasn't even sweating. That means he wasn't guarding anybody. Like James Harden made life too easy for people, came down, step back three. No, you got to get people running. You got to get them moving. I really think you got to go at him because you got to make him uneasy on the court.
So Leif says he forced Boston into major high turnovers versus their averages this season. So this is not the defense show, but I want to say real quick on that. This Heat defense is not the same team that played Boston earlier in the year. They just play defense differently. Oladipo is a huge part of kind of their high turnover stuff. They're a little more conservative. They're just not. I don't think they're the same kind of group. But obviously Boston has looked a little shaky this postseason. Tiff, I 100% agree with you on that. And I love matchups like this because Boston has good defenders all over the floor. Every guy we've talked about is a good,
Mm-hmm.
positive defensive player. And I think this is the kind of sicko shit Spo loves. It's like,
Right.
all right, guys, which one of these motherfuckers are we going to break first? And last year it was Derek White. Derek White was the first guy to kind of crack. And that was really, that was the first, kind of crack in the armor where Miami was able to kind of burrow in and get enough points and kind of create rotation off of that. Again, let's kind of wrap up, kind of close our thoughts here. If I'm Miami, I think my winning conditions are, you need Love to hit enough shots because I think certainly Robert Williams is going to be defending him. I don't think they're going to do the reverse because Al Horford isn't the same kind of help guy that Robert Williams is, and I think having Al Horford kind of go from the weak side all the way to the ball or at the nail, I just don't think that's like makes a ton of sense. I think it makes more sense to have Horford as a drop man, which they've always done against Bam, and have Rob Williams kind of come in. I honestly don't see a world where they don't start both of those guys. I know that Mazzulla has leaned 5-out offense, but it sounds like the players all like when Robert Williams starts, and they just won a big series with that. They're playing the Heat where they know that worked, and Mazzulla was there last season when he made kind of input. So I'm operating under that assumption. But I think that's the scenario. If you're Miami, your win conditions are Love and Caleb and anybody who's in that weak side kind of has to hit enough shots. I think you need Jimmy to be right. And I think you need Bam and Lowry to really kind of have those downhill type games and Lowry on the pull up. And I think if you do those things on offense, if you're Miami, I think you have a good series. We have not talked about Duncan. I think Duncan, and maybe you guys can chime in if you want, I think we kind of know what we get from Duncan. It's the same shit we get. It doesn't change for Dunk. Regardless of the opponent, that man's going to do what he does, whether you like it or not. So it kind of is what it is. Boston will switch some. He's kind of showing what he can do against that, but I don't know if there's too much to say about that. Guys, do you have anything else that you think is a must, like win condition for Miami on offense?
Go ahead, Bon.
I think I think it's going to be a lot of decision making. I think the ability is there. I think the reads and the thrust and kind of confidence in our reactions are going to dictate a lot. Whatever you see at the angle of that corner when you come off that screen, when you're in that kind of nail area, how we're moving out of that. I too feel like it has to be a lot of Bam. I really do think you get a good Kyle series. And Kyle, when he kind of comes off of his screen, he crosses back in front of Bam's path so often. He gets himself almost like right back kind of to the side that he was at, but there's still space there and he's still able to elevate. He hit kind of a three that way. It just kind of like felt like he circled around himself a little bit. And I think you get good series from Kyle, Gabe. I do think you get something from Max. I think that there's space that you can run some Max Kevin Love lineups. I don't know how much I want to see that again with the what we have to worry about defensively. I think that you can do some things creatively, but rebounding and kind of just mid to second third of the half court, kind of just that in that slice, what we look like there.
Tiff, what about you?
I mean, I'm not even going to talk about Jimmy being right because if you don't have that, you got nothing. So that's
if you
just
don't
what
have
it is.
that, you need Bam to be a player that we haven't seen him be yet.
Right.
Yes, correct.
Which,
so
by the way,
I'm not doubting it, but
he could do it. And if there was a team for him to do it, it would be this one.
Well, let's just say it's time. Even if Jimmy is right, it's time.
It'd be on him and Kyle, and it'd be Kyle. Let's earn those big bucks that we gave you. Put in a 7-game performance, but yeah.
Yeah, you need Jimmy to be right. I want to see Bam. Honestly, I want to see him bring in that game 6 momentum into this first game. The way he just started strong, the way he attacked the basket,
strong,
all the things. I want him to bring that forth. Like that has to come with him. But if you told me we shot, I don't know, 39, 40% from three, I'll tell you we win.
I don't think they can shoot 30% from three like they did last playoff run against Boston, and I don't think they can shoot like they did against the Knicks. I think they need to get closer to how they shot against Milwaukee. And by the way, ESPN had them at
What did
three
they shoot?
against Milwaukee.
Yeah.
That I don't have, but it was like
Okay.
in the 40s.
Though I think if they could get to 40%,
I don't even think it needs to be that high. I think if they get to 38, I think that's like
yeah,
that's. I think if you can get to 30, because if you're hitting 38, a killer says they shot 38 against Milwaukee. That might be because maybe they cooled off at the end, but if they get to 38, that just means you're hitting. The math kind of dictates. Like if you're hitting around 38, you can math them if they're leaving your shooters open enough, and you're like, okay, we can get enough open shots
Mm-hmm.
to survive, and then
Mm-hmm.
have one of our stars kind of take us the rest of the way. Now, and I keep saying the last thing, Miami needs to get to the line against Boston
yeah,
for a lot of reasons, but
yeah,
that's gonna have to be Jimmy and Bam. They don't have the rest of the guys to do it. Make those guys
right.
foul, particularly their bigs, and I think you can kind of manipulate when that help comes. You can run lower pick and rolls like what the Spurs used to do with Allen and Tim Duncan. Kind of instead of those high pick and rolls, you set kind of a screen a little bit above the nail, and you run pick and roll there. You force that help to come a little bit, a little bit tighter, and you can kind of maybe manipulate some contact. Now, obviously, the kick out for three. They have to be a downhill team first, and I think that oftentimes when we talk about shooting, we think, oh, the shooting is a priority. The shooting has to be a product of getting to the rim and getting to the line, and that
Yep.
comes from Jimmy and Bam being aggressive, and Kyle for that matter, because that guy gets paid enough money that he comes off the bench and he's a role player and all that stuff, but it's his responsibility as well as one of the lead ball handlers to make sure that you guys are getting in the paint, you are forcing rotation, and any shooting you get comes off of set actions or it's coming off of penetration and kick off help. And I think that's what you got to do against a team like Boston that really has no weak defenders.
No, I agree. You have to, and like you said, you do that with intentional action. You do that with like, maybe a little bit of unconditional spacing in the pick and roll, like you said. I like it setting the pick lower so that it's 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 setting the action, it's starting the action already a bit downhill, like inside the hill, and then seeing if you can like drill your way deeper and kind of hope it cracks that way. Um, I agree, and you're not just going to like float your way into good looks defensively. You're not just going to, but
Mhm.
my Boston can get a little bit lost on the help side, like a little bit in the moments of like lack of discipline. I think you kind of want to exploit. But I agree in that the bulk of their shooting should come off of things that feel sustainable, things that feel like we can replicate it. We have versions of it, we have variations of it. Oh, we ran it this way this time. Oh, run, the third option of
Right.
this, stuff like that. And for me, that's what our processes have been. That's what they've shown and felt capable of doing for a large portion of this run. And again, I think Boston plays at least enough possessions of a style of a defense that is conducive to kind of our offensive weaponry.
And the other thing,
Yeah.
Tiff, is the big passing between Bam and Love is not something they've had before
Yeah.
Right.
against Boston, because even when they had redacted, that really wasn't what they did, and he didn't play a lot
Right.
that series. So that's another kind of element to this puzzle that I think is kind of important. Is now you have a big that can get you the ball from the top. So if Love
Mhm.
catches the ball up top, Bam can kind of set up shop down low, and Rob Williams is effectively out of that play because of kind of where they trigger it.
Right.
Obviously, Love at the elbow, stuff like that. They have Love is really key to this
Yes.
series,
He is.
and I think if Miami can get them to play small, that is the biggest win you can get, because at that point now Miami gets to play their game.
Mhm. But even with Kevin Love, and that's the other thing. Like we we saw him just like get the ball out quickly, like get us into early offense, get us going downhill, get us like the fast break. that that's why I said like he does he missed so many shots last series, but he did so many other little things that we always forget about. Um, and part of that is, will Jimmy be healthy enough to get out and run? Because he did a lot. He did a lot of getting downhill really quickly with those passes against Milwaukee. Obviously not so much with the Knicks because of the hurt ankle, but you need those. You need those fast break points. You need to take care of the ball. Um, and the starters, they're not they're not making the silly mistakes that they were making early in the season, or honestly throughout the entire regular season. Let's be honest. They seem to kind of figure out and find the groove that they're in, and I'm excited. I'm excited to see this first game. I'm excited to see this because to me it's a coaching chess match. Like, to see these two coaches kind of like implement their plays and literally who folds first.
I think there's a lot of talk about like, oh, well, Spo's gonna fucking coach circles around Missoula. I think you expect that, but these are professionals that are prepared, and I know that Missoula doesn't have the best track record this postseason, but I've seen crazier things happen. So, gotta stay sharp, gotta stay on your game. Do you guys? I don't want to put you guys on the spot. Do you want to do predictions?
For what?
For the
Game
series?
one?
Are you
For
not
the
ready?
series?
I don't want to put you on blast in front of the public. If you
Ooh.
say I need information to think about it, we could do it another day. Okay, I think
Miami in my mind says 7. My heart wants to say 6.
six would be the home. Six would be the home win.
Mm.
Tiff, do you got anything, or are you gonna wait for more
No,
information?
because honestly, I already made my mind up the other
I think
day.
they're
If
up for it.
I think if they I think they're up and ready for it. But I think if they get game one, I got them in 6. If and because I think they'll get the split in Boston. If they get game two, I got them in 7.
They're a fucking tough team, and I would not have said this in February.
Yeah, I think they get the split.
Tiff, would you have said this is a tough team in February?
Gee, I told you they was going to be in the Eastern
You
Conference
did.
Finals,
That's true.
or at home.
You said they're
or
going
at
to be at
home.
home.
Or at home.
Those were my two choices.
They got the most.
You can go this, or you can get with that. You can get with this, or you can get with that.
Yeah, exactly. It's gonna be a long. It's gonna be a long series.
But
I
gee,
hope.
what do you got? You got a prediction?
Yeah.
I don't.
No, come on, give it.
Not yet.
Boston and 6.
Come on, have the guts.
Not yet.
I think Boston.
Wait, what? Say
I
it again.
said
I
Boston
think,
and
I think
6.
Boston in 5 or 6. I just
And
I
5.
I don't. I know, and I'm supposed to be like the rah Heat guy. I really want to
I'm
be
not-
wrong. I really want to be
I
wrong.
can see a path. I
We
can
can
see a
put this
path
on
to it
receipts.
easily.
I know. Chat's like, damn, G, what the hell? I know.
The path is Jimmy.
I know.
If Jimmy's not healthy,
I don't-
then I agree with G.
I don't know. Jimmy's ankle is a huge question mark for me. I have a lot of respect for Boston.
It's Jimmy's ankle and Tyler's goneness. Like the both of that.
Like,
that
that's
is
a
a
lot
lot.
to overcome.
That's a lot.
So
It is.
let's be real for a second on a couple of things here.
Yeah.
I have negative respect for the Philadelphia 76ers. And I have negative respect for the New York Knicks. The Heat beat the Knicks without their essentially their two best offensive players. Jimmy was taken out of that series by an ankle, and Tyler's busted hands. And Knicks fans can be like, we didn't get blown out in Game 6, and hang their little banner. But your team fucking sucks. And Boston's a really good team. And
No, they're really good.
and I
They
think
are.
Tatum got the wake-up call that he's like, oh, I'm him. Because really,
I have to be on all the time.
in
and I
Game
can't.
6, he was not him. I was making the jokes in group chats. I was like, how is where'd the dog in him go? You know what I mean? Like, you know the meme, the X-ray, and it's just like there's no dog. Where'd the dog go? So part of me thinks the Bucks. So I think the idea of like 3% chance to win the series is like fucking ridiculous. The ESPN
Right.
stuff. And that's just like that's just shitty regular season projections onto a playoff team. Unless they know something about Jimmy's ankle that we don't. But
Right.
I just think Miami is going to need to shoot. Miami shooting has gone down to earth a little bit on good looks. And I just don't think they can shoot this way against Boston, even on top of not having Tyler. And I guess my faith is if you tell me Miami's going to shoot the ball really well and they're going to like operate the way that they did against Milwaukee, I would say Heat in 5 or 6. But I just don't think that team's coming back with Jimmy's ankle and their shooting. So that's why, it's a very wordy explanation to say I'm a gutless coward.
Right. Me, like I said, it comes down to Jimmy.
And listen, by the way, the Sixers won game 1 in Boston and lost the series. So like they can win game 1 and like we don't have to posture. I mean, they would certainly be in the driver's seat. Miami has yet to lose a home game this season, this postseason. So who's to say? Which is fucking incredible.
Right. They were using it in like a couple games ago as slander, saying, I forgot where I was hearing it, that like we haven't performed well at home throughout the series.
What?
And when again, throughout the season, sorry.
They were one of the best
season.
I believe they were one of the best home teams in the league this season.
Either way, we've been,
say
sensational
shit,
at home. They just say things.
People say stuff. People say stuff and they don't watch.
Anything can happen.
Anything can happen. Listen, I made it through a whole show. I did not have a kidney stone flare up, and I didn't vomit from my medication. And while we're ahead, I think we'll take it. Thank you for listening to Miami Heat Beat. Follow us on twitch.tv/Miami Heat Beat. Follow us on Twitter at MIA Heat Beat. Shout out to Blue Wire. Shout out to the family all over Blue Wire. Shout out to Jimmy. Shout out to Big Face Coffee. Repping that shit. Be on the lookout. We may have some big face stuff to give you in the future. So stay tuned. Stay tuned for that, people. We may have some stuff that you might be interested in. And remember, hangover time. Listen, what a way for hangover. Everybody knows this hangover times last season. What a way for hangover time to go out. The basketball gods gave them a Heat series. They gave Brass a series win against the Knicks. If that's proof that there's a god, Tiff.
Yes.
That's proof that there's a god. And the only complaint Brass had is that they won on a weekend because he wanted to go into work the next day and gloat. So
look at that.
Yeah.
As
Nick
ride
fans,
this blaze of glory.
Tiff, Nick fans are defiling any Julius Randle paraphernalia on the streets like he's a dictator. Like he's like Saddam Hussein, or like he's
stomping on his man's face.
You would have thought he went around town kicking puppies. Like,
right.
Dog, if you were to just Photoshop a war criminal, I'd be like, yeah, that makes sense. You know what I mean? Like some evil general or something. But no, it's just the power forward of the New York Knicks.
They hate that dude.
Yeah. Orange Julius, baby.
Orange Julius.
So I've always wanted to ask you, did the orange part factor in because their uniforms are orange, or you're just making a joke of the brand? Or is it just a delightful coincidence?
Oh. No, I was thinking of the drink or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And I said it one day and then I was like, oh, Julius Randle.
I'm running with that.
Shitty just like the drink.
Well,
make sure.
I cannot believe he went out like that. Oh.
I can.
What do you mean?
Oh no! I'm sorry. I'm thinking about Embiid.
I can.
He went out like that. Embiid went out like that. Harden went out like that.
Doc
went out like that.
Nasty.
First of all, can I just say one thing?
I'm gonna say another thing, Tiff. Devin Booker went out like that. But
how in the world do you keep switching Embiid onto Tatum?
You were never that's not a matchup you were gonna win.
That shit was hilarious, dude.
Yes, they just kept switching him onto him, and I'm like, so what is this supposed to do?
But it's funny. That works against Jimmy, not against Jason.
Yeah.
Maybe not anymore. Maybe not this Jimmy.
Not this Jimmy.
Not this Jimmy. That was a long time ago.
She's been through 3 relationships since. She's different.
Right.
She's mature.
This girl is different.
She's different.
She's been hardened by heartbreak.
Listen, she's had her awakening.
Exactly, and don't compare her to Harden.
Listen, Jimmy has shit to prove. I think for Jimmy, this is a bit. So I saw this really cool graphic that was showing like all the Eastern Conference Finals of the last like 15 years or something. and how much of the East has run through Boston and Miami. How I believe only 5 times they weren't in the conference finals.
That's nuts.
It was
That's
it was
nice.
the 4 Cleveland years. They were one of the 2 since 2010 have been in the conference finals, except for the 4 Cleveland years. Although Boston was in one of those, weren't they? And the Toronto Milwaukee year.
Uh,
But G, I don't
that
think
year did
Jimmy has
happen.
anything to prove.
I think to himself. I think that this is a big series for him. You know,
Yeah.
like this is a guy that beat him last year. You know,
And if he was 100% healthy, I think I'd agree with that. But
He's
like
gonna
at this,
push it.
no, I know
He's
he's
gonna
gonna
push
push
it.
it, but I'm just saying at this point we know what the situation
yeah.
is.
So
So he's gonna do everything he can, but
Yeah.
since
I
she ain't got nothing to prove.
she don't have anything to prove, but I kind of agree with G a little bit, and I think in that like they found themselves kind of playing with house money a little bit, but to have gotten this far, not this easily, but like in this manner, it's like, oh no, I can really go for this shit now, and not
Well,
that he
yeah,
didn't feel that way throughout, the
this
season
is
and
totally
the dog.
house money. I mean, this is
no, it's
It's
hot, but that's
it
why I said
is,
I
but
think
it's house money, but it's right there to go get
right.
and like
But he
really
just
really
comes to
claim.
play. I think
Yeah,
he
yeah,
knows who he is, so he
yeah,
knows like I can do this.
yeah.
I'm gonna keep it honest. I think it's a couple of other people who are looking like I got something to prove. Because
Oh,
if God willing, Jimmy's gonna be Jimmy. But it's a
mhm,
couple of other people who got a little bit more to prove.
yeah.
we'll leave on this. Since 2010, the conference finalists have been Boston, Miami, Boston and Miami, 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 Boston, 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 Miami, Boston, Miami, Boston, Miami. So it's a lot of times. It's been, 2010, 11, 12, 13, 14, 17, 18, 20, 20, 22, 23. That is a lot of stuff. And the East runs through these 2 teams. They have, without a doubt, been the 2 best teams since really the turn of the decade and beyond. Really, I mean, we're gonna we might be 20 years of these teams fucking
That's
going at it with each
remarkable.
other. It is
Yeah.
really one of the only last. I mean, really, I would say one of the few rivalries right now that has kind of spanned a long time. I mean, maybe
Hmm.
Memphis Golden State, from the
Mm.
Zebo teams and just a lot.
They keep trying to make Philly Boston fetch, and like she fetches, but
Oh, but
Right,
I
that
feel
was a
like
thing back in the day.
right,
right,
That has
right.
history behind it,
yeah,
and Boston fans will tell you like more so than the Lakers, the Philly are their chief rivals. Because they're in the conference and they played each other every year and all that stuff. But
mm-hmm.
a lot of Boston fans say no, Miami's our rival,
Mm-hmm.
and I
It
think
should be.
Heat fans
We're
kind
the
of
standard.
yeah, I think against each other. So
Hmm.
fun stuff coming up. Hangover time after every game, pre-gaming with Frankie, Lou, myself, and whoever else from Heat Beat has offerings. Went a little long today. Sorry to Tiff and Bond. I know y'all have shit to do, but what a series to preview. Hey, we don't get a lot. I was gonna say we don't get a lot of these, but as a matter of fact, we do get a lot of these. It's kind of the privilege out here. We will see you guys tomorrow. I will be on with Troppy Baby of 5 on the Floor, previewing the defensive side of the ball and what Miami may kind of spring on Jason and Jalen then. So till then, peace out, love y'all, and let's get ready for Wednesday.
Later.